Welcome to Global Investment Voice, your premier podcast for diving deep into the world of investment migration. Are you dreaming of a second or third passport? Then join us as we traverse the globe, exploring the ins and outs of the U.S. EB-5 immigrant investor visa, uncover the secrets of golden visas, and delve into the many residency and citizenship by investment programs. Each episode is packed with exclusive insights from top industry experts. Whether you're an investor, developer, or a visionary entrepreneur, we're here to guide you through the complexities of global investment migration. And who better to navigate this journey with than your hosts, the dynamic legal duo of this industry, Mona Shah and Rebecca Singh. Plus, hear directly from a lineup of global investment migration leaders. So, buckle up and tune in to Global Investment Voice, where your global investment journey begins and expands.
Well, we have a fun title for all our listeners out there today, Dancing with Dollars. Mona, what is this? The love-hate relationship with EB-5 Escrow.
Yeah, I thought it was a fun title. What else could we say? Welcome to the Escrow Tango, love-hate stories from the EB-5 journey. I don't know. Maybe we should throw it into AI and see what they say. I'm sure ChatGPT would come up with some great titles. But seriously, Rebecca, we're diving into a topic today that has been both a blessing and a curse for many a legacy EB-5 investor. Escrow accounts.
So we're going to take it back a step and explain what is a legacy case. We throw that word around all the time. And for our listeners, we just want to say that these are cases that are filed pre-RIA. So it's cases filed, the I-526 petitions or even I-839 petitions that are filed before the Reform and Integrity Act of 2022 came in. So Mona, you say blessing and curse for these escrow accounts. What do you mean?
So most projects, EB-5 projects, used escrow. And just imagine this scenario. You've waited patiently for years, and I mean years, because look at all that's happened in EB-5 over the last 5 years, from the program closing down to COVID to new administrations. So there have been a lot of delays. So now you've navigated this labyrinth of the EB-5 visa process. You've waited all these years. You've completed all the necessary paperwork. More importantly, you've made your investment, followed every guideline to the letter. And just when you're on the cusp of actually getting your green card, USCIS sends back an RFE. And what happens? The element which has been designed to safeguard your investment becomes the very hurdle.
Oh, I think you're so right on that, Mona. I mean, this is something that we are seeing now. Like you said, it's been years for many of our investors. And we're seeing this in, a few recent adjudications, not just our cases, but just across the board. We're seeing a lot from other lawyers. We're trying to figure out what to do. And escrow has just become a paradox for not just us, for investors, for developers. It's like, what do we do?
Yeah, it's true. Well, remember, escrow was initially introduced, and I'm talking about back in like the 2005, 6s, when EB-5 used to take 2 months to adjudicate. So it was initially introduced as a protective measure, actually marketing. It was the Chinese who really wanted it. Escrow is not a requirement in the regulations. It's not in RIA at all. In fact, it's really been a hindrance because USCIS wants to see a commitment, usage, sustainment of funds. And if your money's sitting in escrow, they don't see that.
So when did escrow become popular?
I think from the outset it was there. I mean, the outset of when we saw the program really take off, going back to 2006, 2007, there are many projects, as you know, Rebecca, where they don't use escrow. Yeah. But all the big projects and all the projects which went out for passive investors, they all use escrow.
Yeah, so it was a way, I know it became, for us, we saw a lot of it when I first joined EB-5 back in 2011. Mm-hmm. It was popular back then. And we saw that it was there to ensure your investment funds were not released until you hit some milestone with your immigration case. So way, way back long ago, that they held on to the full, at that point, it was $500,000 in escrow until your I-526 petition was approved. So, but at that time, it only took USCIS about 6 months to approve an application.
No, it took 2 months, back in 2007. I don't know if you remember those old Brooklyn Navy Yard cases. It took exactly 2 months.
That was back before my time.
Yeah. So, yeah, obviously, if it takes 2 months, you can keep the whole amount
Mm-hmm.
in escrow. And you can't keep the whole. None of these cases that we've been dealing with is the whole amount.
Yeah. Yeah. Times have changed. As we saw adjudications taking longer and longer, it went from 2 to 6 to then a year and a half, 2 years. So things have changed, certainly changed at that point, where now we're seeing escrow funds, which are being put in a holdback account anywhere from 5% to 25% of the investment funds.
It's an ideal situation that
Hmm.
everybody tries to create. And that's what escrow was. It was an ideal situation. Your money was safeguarded. It provides the investor peace of mind. But now it's become an obstacle.
Well, let's take a step back on that, Mona. Who is actually responsible for escrow?
Oh, well, that's a good question. Most of the time, people use escrow agents. So managing the escrow it should be with a neutral third party, which has no connections with either the project or the investor. And as I said, we've always seen a bank third party. And for the most of the time, many, many, many years, we use Signature Bank.
Yes, yes. And so we had to go through a detailed escrow agreement. And so there were steps taken before, which was good because, again, it's a third party who has oversight and control to ensure that the funds were being released at the right time.
Yeah, it was another layer. And I think with somebody as competent as Signature Bank was, it was a good layer. They often would come back and say, well, this person doesn't seem to be an accredited investor, or
Hmm.
this document's missing. And of course, they reviewed all the PPMs before they even took a case on. So that was an important step. But where the love-hate relationship has really intensified right now is the fact that because of these long adjudication periods, where investors have committed capital, instead of the capital going into the project, producing jobs, they're sitting in escrow. And it puts now the project may not even need that escrow money anymore. And it puts everybody in a bind: investors, project developers, even immigration attorneys who don't know how to respond to USCIS's RFEs.
Yes, yeah. It's just a bit unfair because the delays are not on our end, right? They're on USCIS's end. And like you said earlier, it could have been for several reasons. COVID happened, change in administration, things happened over time. But this isn't anything on the project itself. It's not anything on investors. So here we are now facing.
Well, Rebecca, I'm going to interrupt you there. I mean, not on the project. Obviously, the delays are not on the project,
Mhm.
but how they use the funds is. And that's what has been causing RFEs and in some instances noids. There's more than one project which has been denied because holdback money has been released into the account and the developer has not used it for the correct purpose. And then that comes up at 829 stage. So, yeah, how the developer uses the money is on them and is important.
Oh, 100%. But I think too, some of the issues are, like you said, what if they're just sitting there? You have USCIS reviewing a petition. What if the release terms aren't until the remainder of funds to be released upon the I-526 approval is still adjudicating? USCIS gives you an RFE saying that not all the funds have been used in this project. That's where I think the dilemma stems from as well.
Right.
So what are our options then, Mona?
Well, not using escrow at all is an option. Seriously, developers hate it. Developers have always disliked, and I'm not talking about any developers, all developers we've ever worked with, I've heard all of them bitching about escrow. They find that it just messes up their usages of money and their spending. I get it. When you're not sure how long it's going to take for a case to be adjudicated, you don't know when that money is going to be released. How do you rely on it?
Yeah. Yeah, the
Yeah.
timing of it is very important for developers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, for past cases, obviously every case is different. But generally, Rebecca, as you've often said, there should be language in the offering documents to cover every issue.
Yes, again, it's very important that when for the investors itself, just to make sure to read through those documents to see what is it that's being provided in case there is, again, adjudication times are taking forever.
Well,
Um,
more than the investor, I think the developer really needs to make sure that the appropriate language is there.
mhm.
And then if the language is not there, somebody needs to keep an eye on the time, and then developers could consider going back to the investors and requesting an early release of the escrow funds.
Yes, yes, because the timing, as we mentioned earlier, is really important because USCIS wants to see the funds being used in the projects and it's being used for job creation and sustained.
It's different from E2 there, though, Rebecca, right?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, it is beneficial having escrow for an E2 because imagine you release your funds into a venture, for instance, and then your E2 gets denied. You don't get those funds. And then how do you get to the US to actually run your business? So escrow actually benefits an E2 applicant because it should not be dependent on the financing or any material effects of the case, except for the fact that if you get denied the E2 visa, then your funds get released back to you. So that's a benefit with E2. But what about who has benefited from escrow in EB-5?
Well, the banks certainly benefited. They had,
They're really
had
dancing with the dollars.
Yeah, exactly. Hence the title. Banks had access to that money for years and years, and they played with it. They made a lot of money on it, especially with the heavy escrow, the 25%ers, even the 10%ers. But really, from what we have seen now, with all of these years passing, the people who've benefited the most are anybody who's able to withdraw their application because perhaps they don't want to do EB-5 or they got their green card in a different manner, or if they've been denied.
Yes. So we have seen that work in many circumstances. But what would you suggest, Mona? Would you suggest projects to continue using escrow?
It's such a tricky question, especially considering all the problems that we have seen, which has arisen because of escrow. Obviously, in an ideal world, RIA should be in effect, and the case adjudication should be within a year. If it's within a year, then it's fine to use escrow. I think that moving forward, even if we start with escrow, there should be a provision there to release it after a certain period of time and not to leave it there all the way until final adjudication if there's a delay.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. There has to be some timeline on that. But I think at the end of the day, if investors ask, should it be something to look at when you're conducting your due diligence on projects? And I would say no. I don't think escrow
I agree with you.
Deterrent, of picking a good project. I mean, it's there, it's been helpful, but I think at the end of the day, you want to make sure your EB-5 petition gets through and you want to show that the funds have been used and sustained in the project.
Yeah, I agree. It shouldn't be there on the due diligence unless it's not in the documents, and then perhaps it could be added. But those kind of things can always be added later. But yeah, it's a tricky topic. It's constantly changing. And well, I do hope that we've enlightened our listeners.
Yeah, and we hope those dollars get right to dancing back to the investors.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of Global Investment Voice. A huge thank you to all our listeners for tuning in and sharing this journey with us. Curious about unlocking the potential of global migration and citizenship? Make sure to visit us online at mshawlaw.com and globalinvestmentvoice.com. Dive into our extensive library of podcast episodes. Stay ahead with the latest in migration news by signing up for our insider newsletter. Don't forget to connect with us on social media. Find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook to keep the conversation going. Remember, the insights shared in our podcast are for informational purposes only, so please seek tailored legal, financial, or investment advice where needed. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep investing smart and living well with Global Investment Voice. We'll see you on the next episode.